طيب.
عليكم رب.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. What's that?
Today, what ayah we are starting? What is number?
I don't know the number, but it's on the third page.
Okay, inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله وسلم على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم أصلح لنا ديننا الذي هو عصمة أمرنا وأصلح لنا دنيانا التي فيها معاشنا وأصلح لنا آخرتنا التي إليها معادنا واجعل الحياة زيادة لنا في كل خير واجعل الموت راحة لنا من كل شر. So, in our last class, we were talking about لهم فيها أزواج مطهرة وهم فيها خالدون. I wanted to talk about that more because the aspect of the believing men in Jannah, that they have multiple wives in Jannah. I don't think we talked about it sufficient enough because there's a lot of aspects to this that are important to understand. Because the thing about it, in our society today, most people's mindsets are such that this is a bad thing if a man has more than one wife, or this is not something that I can accept, because men say they can't accept that, also women say they can't accept that, right? So if it's not something they can accept, how can they accept it in Jannah? Both the man and the wife. Okay, so let's say the believing man, how can he accept that he's going to have two additional women at least? So the lowest level in Jannah, the man has two hur'in. And we talked about how there's hur'in and hurtin. Hurtin are your wife, is your wife or wives from this world. Right? Hur'in are your wives from Jannah, they didn't live in this world. So the minimum amount a man will have in Jannah, this is the lowest level of Jannah, he will have the minimum of two hur'in. This is the minimum. Okay? The maximum of hur'in a man will have, this is like the highest level of Jannah, he will have 72 hur'in. Okay? And then add to that his hurtin that he had in this world. Right? The wives that he had in this world. Okay, so now the question is, because there are men who will say that I don't accept having more than one wife. And there's also women that will say, I don't accept for my husband to have multiple wives. So if they don't accept it in this world, how can they accept it in the next? Which is a legitimate question, right? All right. Let's discuss this issue in regards to desires. So let's talk about desires. Obviously, men have different desires than women. But nonetheless, they both have desires, right? And when I say men have different desires than women, obviously I'm speaking very generally, in very general terms, where you might have some women who have the same desires as men. And then you might have some men who have the same desires as women. That happens, okay? But the thing is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this legislation, Allah knows that people have desires. For example, you might have a person who has the desire to kill people, right? Okay. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people out there, and namely serial killers especially, but there's people who haven't done killing, but they have the desire to kill, but they stop themselves. They don't do it. But then there's people who actually do it, right? Okay. So those desires exist. There's men who desire haram things with other men, right? Those desires exist. There's women who desire things with other women. Those desires exist. Can you carry out any of those desires? Can you carry out any of those desires? No. Islamically, no. Right? So just because you have a desire doesn't mean it's okay for you to fulfill that desire. Okay? And this is basic and obvious. We know this. But the question is, what desires are okay and what desires are not? Allah is the one who determines that. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us laws and regulations to limit our desires. Right? For example, you have a desire to kill somebody? No, you can't do that. You can't say, oh, I want to kill one person or two people. No. You can't kill anybody. You have a desire to drink alcohol. No, you can't do that. Right? Not even a little bit. Not even a sip. As the Prophet ﷺ, he said that whatever a lot of it makes you drunk, a little of it is a haram. So not even a little taste. Nope. Nothing. Doesn't matter how much you want it. It doesn't matter how much you desire it. No, you can't do it. Does that make sense? Allah also allowed marriage, right? So now, there's a desire to actually do the things that are done in marriage, right? There's that desire to do that thing. A man's desire to do that thing is different than a woman's desire. They're looking for two different things. But nonetheless, they meet that they want the same at the end. At the end of the day, they want the same thing, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His infinite wisdom, He allowed that. But in a very specific manner. He allowed it through marriage. And He gave us all of the laws and rules in order for you to fulfill that desire. Right? There's certain times you can't do it. Even if you are married, no, you still can't do it. Does that make sense? So there's laws and rules. Ramadan comes in the middle of the day in Ramadan. You can't do it. You get what I'm saying? So even though Allah made this halal, He made it halal with limits. And Allah made these limits based on His divine wisdom. Allah knows what limits are good for the human being, humankind. Okay? Now with that being said, now we understand there's halal desires and haram desires. Now let's talk about another aspect of this, which is a fitra desire and a non-fitra desire. Fitra is the state that we're in, or the state that Allah created us in. And when Allah created us, He created us perfectly, beautifully, right? For example, the grass was created in such a way that it comes out the way that it comes out. But if you misuse the grass and you mistreat the grass, then it comes out in a bad way, or it doesn't come out at all, right? Allah gave us many things in this world that is beautiful in the way that it is, the way that it was created. Right? So He gave us many things that's beautiful in the way that it's created, But if we misuse it and we mistreat it, then it's ugly. So we're taking it away from the way Allah created it. Does that make sense? So now there are desires that are based on the way Allah created us, and there's desires that are not based on the way Allah created us. So how do we know what desires are based on the way Allah created us and desires that are not based on the way Allah created us? Okay. We know that because Allah legislated the desires based on the way Allah created us, legislated us to do those, to fulfill those desires. I desire to eat. Allah created us to eat, so I can fulfill that desire, right? In a halal way. But just you can't just do whatever you want, however you want it. You can't just eat anything. Allah says don't eat pork. Allah says don't eat too, like the Prophet ﷺ taught us not to eat too much, right? So on and so forth. There's rules. Why are these rules there? So that we don't overdo it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Drinking alcohol, right? Someone might say, "Oh yeah, it's normal. It's natural," right? Smoking weed, right? They say, "Oh yeah, that's it's natural. It comes from the earth," right? So all these things, someone might say, "Oh, I desire this," but the reason Allah made it haram is because that desire is a corrupted desire. Does that make sense? How can there be a corrupted desire? A corrupted desire, for example, let's say a serial killer. Right? No one can claim that a serial killer had a perfect childhood and was like, he had everything amazing, like how normal people do, and he grew up like a normal life. No, he had something that was extremely distressful in his life that corrupted his desires. And then now that his desires are corrupted, he is desiring something that is wrong. Same thing with alcohol. The fact that you desire the alcohol, it's because your fitra thing is corrupted. Your fitra system has been corrupted. And then therefore you want something that's actually not good for you. Does that make sense? Like why would I want to eat junk food, for example? Because I have bad eating habits. If you have good eating habits, if you have a proper system, then you would love the foods that are actually good for you. They would actually taste good. They would actually feel good. They would actually, everything about it, you would just love that. You don't want the bad foods. Does that make sense? So it's the same type of thing with your fitrah, is that when Allah created us, He created these fitrah things in us that we, like the things that Islam brought, is our fitrah. Does that make sense? Okay, so now that I said the fitrah issue is wanting the thing that is good, not wanting the thing that is bad, understand that just because I don't want something good, let me give you an example. Just because I don't like to eat an apple's amazing for you. Just because I don't like to eat an apple, that doesn't make me a bad person. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I probably should eat it. Yeah, it's probably good for me. But just because I don't want it doesn't make me bad. Does that make sense? So that is the difference between halal desires, haram desires. Does that make sense? Halal desires, haram desires means like this is halal and haram. So you have to learn to adjust your desires to be with halal and not want haram. That takes time, takes training. But that is halal haram. But then there's the issue of the fitrah and your desires being on the fitrah. It's not so bad that it's not on the fitrah. Does that make sense? It doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing that it's not on the fitrah, but it just means that you're not fully on the fitrah. Does that make sense? Okay, so now comes the issue of multiple marriage. Now that I've given that long introduction, it's important to understand the history of how in this world people have addressed having more than one wife. So if you go back in history, so every area had different history in this issue, right? And you had in the Arabian culture, right? This was something that was very normal for a man to have multiple wives, right? And it was very normal, and it's still normal till this day. It's becoming less and less normal today, but it has been always normal, okay, in the Arabian culture. In the Christian Judaic culture, it was also very normal, okay? It stopped becoming normal later in the Christian faith, or in the Christian tradition, when the pagans started to mix with pagans, because this was something that pagans didn't do. Pagans didn't have more than one wife. You know what I'm saying? And then honestly, I don't really know all the other histories in the different parts of the world as much, but just in those three cultures, this was obviously something that was done. And obviously this was something that was okay in those three cultures because of Islam, because they all have the background of Islam. Okay? So this tells us that this is a fitra desire of a man, and it is a fitra thing of a woman to be like, not a big deal. Okay? Now, just because this is the fitra, this is the normal, doesn't mean it's not good that somebody doesn't want that. It's okay. Does that make sense? Again, I gave the example of that, of like an apple, right? Just because you don't want to eat an apple doesn't make you a bad person. Does that make sense? Yes. But the reason why I'm tying it to the fitrah, I'm getting to that, is because it's important to understand that when understanding Jannah. Because Allah gives us based on our desires, our fitra desires. Does that make sense? So what we're going to get in Jannah is we're going to be back onto our fitra, and our desires are going to be on our fitra. Does that make sense? Yeah. So therefore, the men are going to want what the fitra of their desires are. Does that make sense? And it is in the man's fitra, and as a matter of fact, I talked about those three cultures that they got married. But all the other cultures did the exact same thing, but in a haram and an ugly way. So all the men were going around doing haram things because they have that desire, but they were doing it in a way that was harmful to the community. Right? And Islam, it allowed men to do it in a way that was beneficial to the community. Do you get what I'm saying? Yes. So understand that there's fitra desires, right? And these fitra desires, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us with them in Jannah. Does that make sense? So one may look at this, especially women in society today, because the norm today is a woman only marries one man and a man only marries one woman. This is the norm in society today, right? So therefore the woman may feel like that's not fair in Jannah. He's getting, the man, her husband, So he's going to Jannah. He's going to get at least 2 other women, 2 other wives. Right? So she's like, how is that fair? Again, the reason that's fair is because this is catering to his desires, first of all. Because his fitra desires, he wants more women. Does that make sense? And then catering to her desires, because her fitra desires is not that she wants more men. Her fitra desires is that she wants to be the queen. Right? So therefore, the hurtin are the queen of all the women. The queens of all the women. Does that make sense? I mean, there may be other fitra desires I don't know about. I'm not a woman, so I can't tell you what exactly the desires are, but nonetheless, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us whatever our desires are in a just way. Does that make sense? In a way, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, وَنَزَعْنَا مَا فِي صُدُورِهِم مِّنْ غِلٍّ. We have taken away any hatred or any animosity from their hearts. So in Jannah, there is no jealousy. There's no such thing as jealousy. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing as bad feelings towards someone else. It does not exist. Right? So everyone is happy. Everyone is content. And people want more. Don't get me wrong. But they want more of the fitra desires. Does that make sense? And and Allah gives them more. So it's a different mindset than what's on earth. Because on earth, we are corrupted. Right? And our mindset on earth is corrupted. So therefore, the things that we want on earth is corrupted. Does that make sense? But in Jannah, hopefully, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from amongst the people of Jannah. They want the pure thing. And Allah gives us what is pure. Right? And therefore He says, لَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. So that they have wives that are pure. And again, as I mentioned, the lowest level of Jannah, the men have 2 hur'in. Okay, again, hur'in are the women of Jannah. They are not women from this world. And then whatever wives they had in this world, they are also their wives in the next world. And they're hur'in, which are like the queens of those of hur'in. Nonetheless, he says, وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ, and that they are there everlasting, forever. And this is the thing about Jannah that is completely unique from this world. This and the fact that they continue to get better. Okay? Because in this world, you might like something, but what? You're going to like it for 10 seconds? 20 seconds? An hour? What, maybe a day? But that's it. Like, who can enjoy something all day long and then do it all day long the next day? And all day long the next day? No. You're going to, after a certain point, you're going to be like, all right. It doesn't matter how amazing it is. Right? Whatever it is. Halal, haram, doesn't matter. Does not matter how amazing it is. You can't enjoy it forever. You can't. It's not possible. Why? Because this world is limited. Therefore, the satisfaction that you're looking for in this world, you're looking for it in the wrong place. Because you don't get it. What, you get it for 10 seconds? 20 seconds? 30 seconds? Right? Let's say you have the desire to drink alcohol. Well, how long are you going to enjoy it? The hangover, right? For example, the bad feelings afterwards because you got drunk.
I know what you did.
Right? And that's just one example. And that's a haram thing. But it also applies to halal things. Right? To overindulge in something that's halal. Oh yeah, what? You're going to enjoy it for an hour? 10 seconds? Like, what? A day? You get what I'm saying? It's not going to last. But the thing that's going to last is Jannah. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said the place of a whip in Jannah. A whip, like something that you might whip the buraq with, for example. Buraq is the animal that's kind of like a horse, but it goes really fast. Right? So like, let's say the whip, the Prophet ﷺ said the place of the whip is better than the entire world and everything in it. Like, how can that be better than the entire world and everything in it? Because it lasts forever. Forever. But this world, it's limited. It doesn't last for that long. What is your, like, to be honest with you, even if this world lasted for another 10,000 years, it's not 10,000 years for us. Right?
Yeah.
The world lasts as long as your life lasts. Because anything after that doesn't really, you don't care about it. You're not experiencing it. So the world really only lasts as long as your life does. So what, are you going to last for 60 years? 70? 80? Okay, let's say 100. Just for argument's sake, even though not many people reach that age, right? But let's say it's 100 years. What is 100 compared to forever? Nothing. Nothing. So even if you enjoyed something for 100 years, let's say you enjoyed it every day, every moment of that day for 100 years, can it possibly be better than something you're going to enjoy forever? No. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, the place of a whip is better than the entire world and everything in it. Because the enjoyment in Jannah is all the time, is every day, and it's getting better and better and better, and it's forever. وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. وَهُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. You got any of the shabab on to read?
Yeah, they're on.
Yeah, sorry.
إن الله لا يستحي.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله لا يستحي أن يضرب مثلا ما بعوضة فما فوقها فأما الذين آمنوا فيعلمون أنه الحق من ربهم وأما الذين كفروا فيقولون ماذا أراد الله بهذا مثلا يضل به كثيرا ويهدي به كثيرا وما يضل به إلا الفاسقين الذين ينقضون عهد الله من بعد ميثاقه ويقطعون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل ويفسدون في الأرض أولئك هم الخاسرون كيف تكفرون بالله وكنتم أمواتا فأحياكم ثم يميتكم ثم يحييكم ثم إليه ترجعون هو الذي خلق لكم ما في الأرض جميعا ثم استوى إلى السماء فسواهن 7 سماوات وهو بكل شيء عليم.
حسبك. جزاكم الله خيرا. So after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he talks about the example of the hypocrites. He gave us 2 examples, right? he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not shy to make an example. So we understand that there can possibly be shyness for Allah, right? So now this is an attribute that is attributed to Allah. And as we know, in all attributes that we talk about in regards to Allah, we have a couple of principles. Principle number one, because Allah, we have these principles from this ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Right? So principle number one is لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There's nothing like Him. There's nothing like Allah. So I don't care what you can imagine when you hear an attribute of Allah and that you in your mind might compare to Allah, it's not like Him. Doesn't matter what it is, because He says nothing is like Him. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. There is nothing that is like Him. Okay? So that's principle number one. Does that make sense? Principle number two is right after He said لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, that there is nothing like Him, He says وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. He is all seeing and all hearing. Okay? So He literally just said there's nothing like Him, but then He says He's all seeing, all hearing, all seeing. Right? Our simple minds, when we think hearing, we're looking at our ears. That's what our simple minds, that's how we think. When we think hearing, we're thinking about any animal that we know that hears. Like, we're not looking at the tree and saying, oh, that tree can hear me. We don't do that. Because this is how our simple minds think. Right? But that's why Allah first told us that there's nothing like Him. So if I want to compare Him to the tree, I can't. Because the tree is something, right? It's not like Him. If I want to compare Him to a human being, no, I can't do that. Because the human being is not like Allah. There's nothing like Him. So what does it mean that Allah hears? I don't know, but He said He does. Right? وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Basir, all seeing. Same thing. Our simple mind, when we hear seeing, we're thinking of every animal or being or insect or whatever that has eyes. Right? But now we have cars that can see. Do they have eyes? Right? So we can say a car sees, right? Like if you have a Tesla, right? It sees, doesn't it? But does it have eyes? No. And I'm not saying Allah doesn't have eyes. I'm not saying He does or doesn't. All I'm saying is that Allah said He sees. What does that mean? I don't know. But He said He does. Okay? So these two principles are extremely important. Principle number one is that we know that there is no one or nothing kill a mosquito. Right? So it's considered to be insignificant, right? Or small. Either insignificant or small. Right? But then He says, the example, like Allah is not shy to make an example of a mosquito, فَمَا فَوْقَهَا, and also what is above it. So what does it mean, above it? فَمَا فَوْقَهَا, above a mosquito. Does that mean example of a mosquito and anything bigger than a mosquito? Or an example of an insignificant mosquito or anything more significant than a mosquito? Right? Some scholars took it to mean that. But some scholars, they took the meaning to be something that made more sense which was that here above it, meaning above it in insignificance, meaning less significant. So Allah is not shy to make the most, what you think is insignificant examples. Basically, what Allah is saying here is that He can make any example, right? And when Allah makes an example, it's because He's the most wise, the most knowledgeable. Like, you don't go to a professor who has 10 PhDs and say, "Hey man, like why are you talking like that?" You don't do that. What you do when you hear that professor talking, you're like, "Oh man, that's a new way of talking. I've never heard that. How do I learn how to do that?" You get the difference of a mindset here? The first mindset is you're questioning the professor. He's got 10 PhDs. How are you going to question a professor? Right? Rather, what everybody does when they hear this professor speaking in a different way they never heard, "Oh wow, that's amazing. How do I do that? How do I learn that type of way to do it?" Does that make sense? And obviously, there's no comparison to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the one who created all knowledge, the one who is knowing of everything. How can we question His example? How? How can we say, "Oh, like, what kind of example is that?" This is what the kuffar were saying, the disbelievers. They hear an example in the Quran, like, "What is this?" They're like, "Why? Why are you giving this example? Why don't you give another example?" Right? So Allah is saying He can give whatever example He wants. Right? Then He said, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فَيَعْلَمُونَ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ. But the believers, when they hear this example, they know that this is the truth from Allah. Because they're approaching it from a different way. The believers, when they hear the example, they're like, the Creator is talking. So it's gotta be the most amazing example. Like, He perfected everything about my body. Everything about it is perfect. Like, with all the amazing science we claim to have today, we can't make a human body. And even if we, let's say one day we made a human body, we can't blow a soul into it. Right? And Allah's doing this every day. He's creating this all the time. Right? So this is a daily thing that's happening. And by the minute, by the second, it's happening everywhere in the world. Right? So obviously, if He says something, I'm going to be like this. I'm going to pay attention. Why? Because this is the most wise speaking. This is how a believer approaches it. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا, but the disbelievers, the ones who don't want to accept from Allah, because whatever reason they could be arrogant, because they want to stay blinded, whatever it is, they don't want to accept it from Allah. They say, "What kind of example is this? ماذا أراد الله بهذا مثلا?" Like what does He mean by this? What is this? What kind of example is that? Does that make sense? So, and that's the thing, and this is very important when we approach the Quran. If you're approaching the Quran from the mindset of, "Yeah, I'm getting into this because I want to prove this wrong," then you're going into this the wrong way. The way you have to come into the Quran is, this is Allah's words, and I need guidance. Ya Allah, guide me. Ya Allah, give me guidance. So when you go into the Quran with this mentality, then now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens the doors for you. Okay? Because the believers, they see that this is from Allah. They know that this is the truth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا فَيَقُولُونَ مَاذَا أَرَادَ اللَّهُ بِهَذَا مَثَلًا. يضل به كثيرا ويهدي به كثيرا وما يضل به إلا الفاسقين. Allah misguides many with the Quran. People are misguided with the Quran. How are they misguided? Because they're fasiqeen. And then we talked about fisq. Let's see if any of... All right, exam time. What does fisq mean? Anybody remember?
It's the covering of the date.
Yes. So what happens is the date has the peeling, has the, what is it called?
The date covering?
Yeah, what is the cover of the date?
The skin of the
The
date.
skin, yes. Okay, yeah. So the date has the skin, right?
Yeah.
So when you have dates, you want to keep the skin on. Why? But by the way, most of the dates that we have in America, this doesn't really apply to because they're all usually dry.
Yeah.
This applies to wet dates, like fresh dates. Okay. I guess I think a grape is probably a good example.
Yeah.
So let's say a grape. Okay, grape has skin, right? What happens when you take the skin off of the grape?
Just like flashes.
Huh?
The flashes, like if we take ours off, it'd be wet and gooey and fleshy and.
It will
Right.
get rotten.
It's what?
Will rot.
It will rot.
It would rot faster.
Okay.
So like maybe maybe your normal grapes would last what, 5 days? 6 days?
Yeah.
But if you take the skin off, how long is it gonna last now?
The same couple of hours.
Hours,
Yeah.
right? So that's fisq. That action of taking the thing outside of its skin, taking the skin out, is fisq. Right? So these people, they are fasiqeen because they left their skin. What is the skin? Is the rules that Allah has given us to protect us. Halal and haram. That's your skin. Okay? So when you leave the halal and haram, like you do the haram and you know, you're not doing your obligations, you're leaving the skin. Right? So you're rotting sooner, so to speak. Does that make sense? So so these people are the ones that get misguided by the Quran. Because their life is sin. Their life is in wrong. So they are getting misguided by the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. So Allah misguides many and He guides many. وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. Right? He misguides many. By يَهْدِي بِهِ, He's talking about the examples. Right? But also the Quran in general. But specifically here, He's talking about these examples. Okay? He misguides with these examples many, and He guides many with these examples. So therefore, we understand from this, anytime you hear something from the Quran, the mentality that we have to have is, first and foremost, I accept it.
Unseen.
What's that?
It's like the unseen. That's what Islam. We have to believe in.
Right, that's the first step. I accept it. But I'm not understanding it, maybe. So let me understand it. Let me gain knowledge so that I can grasp it more. Right? A perfect example of that is the وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ. We were talking about how the men have more than one wife in Jannah. Right? So again, the most common mindset in our world today is a lot of men, they're like, I can only have one wife. And a lot of women, they're like, my husband can only have one wife. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So therefore, how can this be beautiful? Does that make sense? So this is the mindset that comes out of this. Allah says, وَلَهُمْ فِيهَا أَزْوَاجٌ مُطَهَّرَةٌ. So then some might say, like, how is that fair? right? But again, you have to come with the right mindset into the Quran. Allah, Allah, Allah.
The Fasiqeen, they're kuffar, or I mean, they could be Muslim too, who violate the legislation or laws.
Yes. Yeah, the lowest level. Yeah, the lowest level of the fasiqeen are Muslims. But I mean, obviously, the same applies to the kuffar, right?
So my question would be, are you finished with her?
Yeah.
Continue. Question would be, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talks about the masala, that the story that he told us earlier in this
The
surah,
examples, yeah.
the example of the munafiqun, the believer, all that kind of things that he's talking about.
Yeah.
That's the one he's kind of summarizes
In regards to the
in
fasiqeen?
the previous ayahs.
About, making examples, yeah.
Yeah, those examples that he's talking about that he gave.
Yes, but it's also an introduction to the many examples that are going to come.
Okay, yeah, previous.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's important to, like, Allah is basically saying here, like Allah gives examples.
Yes.
Okay? So you have to accept them if you are a believer. Right? And you should not have the mentality of going into these examples of what does Allah mean by this?
Mm-hmm.
Like as a way to, like you're saying, like, well, what kind of example is this?
Critic.
Right. Right?
Okay.
But the other aspect to this that I want to make sure we understand is it's not just the examples, it's everything in the Quran. Right? So we have to accept it all as if it is perfect. Right? Again, we're talking about the creator who created these amazing bodies that we have. Right? And everything else in this entire universe. How amazing it all is. Like how, for example, there is no leaf on the face of the planet that's exactly like another. How? Like, I studied like the random theory when I was studying in my master's degree or whatever. So I was studying the random theory, and basically the thing they tell you in the onset is there's no such thing as random. It doesn't exist. It's just they create a random model, and then the question is, how good of a random is this random? There's no such thing as a perfect random.
No.
It doesn't exist. So they're telling me, these scientists who are like supposed to be like super smart, there's no such thing as random, but yet they also tell me that there's a leaf in China that's born today, and none of those leaves in China look like any of those leaves here. Really?
Yeah.
And you're telling me that that's random?
It's just like, I'm just saying, my friend has identical twins, and even though they're identical, there's still, one has something different.
Oh yeah,
than
there's no
another
such thing as identical.
You won't. So it's like, why are they called identical? Like one will have an extra birthmark or a little.
It's not
cut on
exactly
something,
identical,
you know,
exactly. There's no such thing.
Yeah.
And if there's nothing exactly identical, because random means that you're going to have something that is like something else. Right?
Random, correct, yeah.
Because it's random.
Yeah.
But the fact that there is never something like something else, it does not exist. It means it's not random. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and the earth, when He gave us this legislation, He gave us this Quran, it is perfect. There is no question about it. If there is a problem that I have with the Quran, it is a problem with my understanding. It is a problem with my heart. It is not a problem. It is not a problem with Allah. It is a problem with me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
وَمَا يُضِلُّ بِهِ إِلَّا الْفَاسِقِينَ. Now, who are these fasiqeen? Now Allah is going to tell us who these fasiqeen are. الَّذِينَ يَنْقُضُونَ عَهْدَ اللَّهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مِيثَاقِهِ وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَنْ يُوصَلَ وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. خاسرون, right? Okay. So who are these fasiqeen? Right? The ones who break the promise that they made with Allah. The promise that they made with Allah. What is this promise with Allah? الذين ينقضون عهد الله من بعد ميثاقه. After that they made this promise with Allah. What is this promise with Allah? There's a difference of opinion with the scholars in regards to this promise.
Is that the ID Allah?
Say it again.
The Allah, the promise of Allah, the ID in Allah.
أَلَسْتُ بِرَبِّكُمْ قَالُوا بَلَى.
Yeah.
Yeah, so some scholars say that this is that promise, right? And this is that promise that scholars say that is related to our fitrah. We were just talking about the fitrah and your natural state that Allah created you in. Some scholars say that this is that promise where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, before we were brought down to earth and Allah created us, right? Allah asked all of us, am I not your Lord? And we all responded that you are. So we all bore witness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our Lord. Right? So therefore we have all the tools that we need to go down that path. So Allah gave us those tools. Now the question is, are we willing and ready to accept those tools? Or will we reject those along the way? Right? Some scholars say that's the promise. Some scholars say that this promise is in regards to any halal and haram that we make a covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So like when I bear witness that there's no God worthy of worship except Allah, I am therefore making a covenant with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He should be the only one that I worship. And when I make this covenant with Allah that He is the only one that I worship, therefore He is the only one that I take do and don't do's from. Because that is worship. Right? Because they say I worship the sun, right? You're like, okay, so what did the sun tell you to do? What did He tell you not to do? How can you worship something that doesn't tell you do this and don't do that? What is His manifesto? What's the sun's manifesto? They can't tell you. Right? When you worship someone, right, you are worshiping them by staying on their law. The law that they gave you. That is worship. Right? The Prophet ﷺ, they came and asked him, they said, Ya Rasulullah, like one of the companions who used to be I don't remember if he was a Christian or a Jew. He was a Jew?
Yeah, he was asking him that we don't worship.
Right. So there's an ayah in the Quran, Allah says that they took their priests and rabbis as lords and they worshiped them. Right? So one of the companions, they said, Ya Rasulullah, we didn't worship our king, priests and rabbis. What does Allah mean in this ayah? You know, they took their priests and rabbis and they worshiped. He said, did they tell you to do something that Allah said was haram? They told you to do it and you guys did it? They said, yeah. He said, did they tell you not to do something that Allah said was halal? And they said, don't do it. And then you guys didn't do it? They said, yeah. He said, that's worship. Prophet ﷺ said, that's worship. Right? So this is when Allah gives us these rules, do this, don't do that, and then we go against that, that is breaking the covenant. That is breaking the promise. Okay? Now, and this opinion, Allah knows best, seems to make more sense just because it is more encompassing to even the first covenant that we made with Allah. Because it includes that. It includes that covenant and every covenant after. Does that make sense? So, they break these covenants. They're constantly breaking these covenants, meaning indulging in haram. Or not doing what they're supposed to do. Not praying their salawat, not paying their zakat, not so on and so forth. Right? Also, breaking covenants in regards to breaking covenants that they have with human beings. Right? Making a promise with someone and then breaking that promise. Taking a loan from someone and not paying that loan back. So on and so forth. All of these things, right, are breaking these covenants. من بعد ميثاقه ويقطعون ما أمر الله به أن يوصل. And they are breaking the ties that Allah has ordered them to connect. Breaking the ties Allah has ordered them to connect. What ties did Allah order us to connect? Family ties. Right? Islamic ties. And any other ties associated with those two ties. Okay? Allah ordered us to connect the ties that are associated with the womb. The womb meaning your mother. Right? Now, this is another aspect. We still have some time, alhamdulillah. This is another aspect. So this is the thing. Because there's this misconception that people have Islam oppresses women. So we were just talking about the issue of multiple wives in Jannah. Someone might say, okay, yeah, that's the example. Allah, Islam oppresses women. Right? You see, the thing is, that's important to understand here, is Allah the creator of men and women. Right? The creator of men and women. Understand what men want and understand what women want. Or understands. Allah, the creator of men and women, rewards men for their actions the way that they want reward. And rewards women for the actions that they do in the way that they want to be rewarded. Not the way society says it. Because now, in our society today, we have men, and then we have women who want to be like men. And then women who want to be like women. Well, like women, exactly. Right? Which is against the fitrah. It's backwards. Right? Where Allah created men with their unique qualities and women with their unique qualities. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَلَا تَتَمَنَّوْا مَا فَضَّلَ اللَّهُ بِهِ بَعْضَكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Don't hope for the things that Allah has given some over others. Right? And when Allah is mentioning this in this ayah, He's talking specifically about women and men, but in general about everything. Because a poor man should not wish what a rich man has. poor man doesn't have money, he shouldn't wish, oh, I need that money that that rich man has. No, you might have something that that person doesn't have. A blind man should not hope to have the thing that people can see have. A deaf man can't hope to have the thing that the people who hear has. So on and so forth. Whatever you don't have that another person has, you should not be hoping for that thing that the other person has that you don't have. Same thing for men and women. A man should not hope for the things that women have, and women should not hope for the things men have. Does that make sense? Everyone has the thing that Allah has given them. He says, لِلرِّجَالِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا اكْتَسَبُوا وَلِلنِّسَاءِ نَصِيبٌ مِّمَّا اكْتَسَبْنَ. Men get a share of what they put forth, and women get a share of what they put forth. So everybody's getting a share. It's just different. Right? وَاسْأَلُوا اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. Rather, ask Allah for His fadl. Fadl is the extra. You know how, like, if you pour water into this bottle, and then the bottle starts to overflow, that the stuff, the water that's coming out, is called fadl. It's extra. So if you want extra, ask Allah for it. Don't be like, oh yeah, I want to have what this guy has. I want to have what that lady has. No. Be content what Allah has given you, and if you want more, ask Allah to give you more. Does that make sense? So I say that to say that what was the ayah we were talking about? Okay. وَيَقْطَعُونَ مَا أَمَرَ اللَّهُ بِهِ أَن يُوصَلَ. So I wanted to talk about the mother, because in subhanallah, the Prophet ﷺ said that the womb is hanging on Allah's throne. Okay? Again, this is something we don't completely understand it, but like, what kind of status is that a woman has? But wait a second, it's not just any woman, it's a mother. What a mother has. Does that make sense? That it's hanging on the throne of Ar-Rahman. And also there's another hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah, out of respect for the mother, Ar-Rahim, the womb, that He extracted His name, one of His names, the most merciful, from that word. What kind of status is that? Right? So I mean, that's something a man would envy. That kind of status. That kind of status, you don't hear that about men. But mothers have that.
In Arabic, that's what that means. I don't know if this means that.
Rahim.
It means.
Womb, yes. The womb.
That's the first time.
Yes. So this is the mother. Okay? So in this hadith, where the Prophet ﷺ said that the womb is hanging on Allah's throne, the womb complained and is asking for more. So Allah tells the womb, wouldn't it satisfy you that if I connect who connects to you and cut off who cuts you off? If I connect who connects to you and cut off who cuts you off. Like, what kind of status is that? So anybody who's cut off from their mother is cut off from Allah. Right? So again, this goes to show you, like everybody is getting their share. Does that make sense? Everybody has their share, so it's important to understand things in the light of what Allah wants from us, as opposed to our desires that may be corrupted. Does that make sense? So, excuse me. So this is one of the things that Allah has ordered us to connect. And by the way, connecting the womb ties, it is your whole family. But it starts with your mother. That's why when the guy came and asked the Prophet ﷺ, he said, who should I befriend? The Prophet ﷺ said, your mother. He said, and then who? He said, your mother. He said, and then who? He said, your mother. He said, and then who? He said, then your father. Right? So this status that your mother has, right? That the mother has. And this status, this connecting status that we're supposed to connect to in regards to our mother is in life and death. It's not just in life. Just because she's alive and okay, now that she's dead, it's done. Prophet ﷺ used to go and be good to his mother's friends. To his mother's friends. And she was not Muslim. She wasn't Muslim. And as a matter of fact, Allah told the Prophet ﷺ that his mother's going to the hellfire. And he was still connecting to his mother's friends. Right? This shows you how important it is to be connected to your mother. There's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, your aunt, your mother's sister, is like your mother. So like if your mother dies, that's your new mother. Because of that connection between her and her. Do you get what I'm saying? So that status, and this is the highest status of a woman, just the status of a mother. Does that make sense? So I say that to say because this is the highest connection of the connections of this world. Your mother. This is the highest connection. Not your friend, not your wife, not your husband, or actually, for women, husband does come before your mother. Yes. Yes. So, okay. So,
Okay.
yeah, Oh, I thought somebody was saying something. I'm just hearing myself being repeated. Okay, so your husband does come before your mother. How is that? Because there is a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that if I were to order someone to make sajda to someone else, it would be a wife to her husband. Right?
Can you repeat that, brother?
Allah yahdik, man. Understand what's the dynamics here. And what it is that in every structure there's a hierarchy. Right? The reason that there's the hierarchy is not because this person on top is better than the people below. It's just that's the way that there's order. Does that make sense? There has to be order in everything. There has to be like in a masjid there should be an imam. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like it doesn't make sense for a masjid to actually have just anybody just leading salah, anybody giving the khutbah, anybody. No, you should have someone who is the person that people listen to, so there is structure. Does that mean that the imam is the best person? Inshallah, but not necessarily. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, we have an amazing imam, but that's not necessarily always the case. Does that make sense? So the same thing goes for the husband. The status of the husband is the leader of the household. Right? So therefore, he has the most respect because this is the household that he is leading. Does that make sense? It's like he's the king of the of the of the castle, right? So therefore he has to have the most respect, and this is that house. But then the leader of that house is his mother. Now understand that his respect to his mother doesn't mean that he has to listen to everything she's telling him, do this and do that. Because that there's situations where this happens, where a mother might be telling him to do something that's bad necessarily for the wife, or that's bad for the kids, right? So this man, the leader of the house, needs to understand, yeah, I have to do what's most best for my mother, but that's not at the expense of everybody else. Because he's the leader, right? But he has to respect his mother. Does that make sense? What about the wife's mother and father? Well, she has to respect them as well, but understand there's a difference here between the man's obligation to respect and the woman's feeling to respect. The man, because men are cold people in general, we need to be obligated to respect our parents. Because they get to a certain point, now they're old and frail, and you're just like, you know what, get away from me. Unfortunately, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us, but this is the mentality of men where you're like, get away from me. So therefore, they're obligated to take care of them. Right? But there is no mother or woman in their right mind that would say to their parents, get away from me. Right? This, like you would say, okay, this is a crazy person who did that. If a woman did that to her mom or her dad. Because the amount of love that she has naturally, she has that respect. So now if the husband is a smart leader in his household, he's going to find every way to make sure she respects her parents too. Because that's going to make her happy. Does that make sense? So he should not come between that. Because this is her Jannah as well. Does that make sense? Yes. But again, her husband does come first because now she is under a different structure. She's under a different structure, so therefore the leader of that structure is first. And then there's other leaders, her mother and father are in a different structure now. Does that make sense? I'm trying my best to explain it as inshallah didn't break. I'm trying my best to explain it without, as best as possible, but in general, like, understand that these structures are in place so that we can please Allah the best. You understand? The mother is still important to the wife. Please don't misunderstand me. Because it still applies where the Prophet ﷺ said that Jannah is under the foot of your mother. This still applies to the wife. Right? So if the husband, for example, is stopping her from getting that Jannah, then he's doing wrong to her. He's oppressing her. He's oppressing his wife. Right? But he does have the right to do that. He does have the right to tell her, oh no, you can't visit your mother, for example. But that's wrong. That's messed up. That's oppression. Because that's her mother. That's where her Jannah is. Does that make sense? And then the fact that she is being oppressed, she's getting rewarded for it. Right? As the Prophet ﷺ said, وَاتَّقِ دَعْوَةَ الْمَظْلُومِ. Beware or be wary of the dua of the person who is oppressed. Because there's no veil between it and Allah. That person and Allah. So that oppression, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees it all. Right? I hope that kind of explains all of that. But the thing that I think I was trying to get here was talking about connecting the ties Allah has ordered us to connect. And there's a long list of ties. Okay? But again, it all starts with your mother. It all starts with your mother. وَيُفْسِدُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ, and they are causing fasad in this earth. Fasad is like ruining something. So like destroying what the purpose of it was.
Yeah.
Okay?
Change the purpose in a harmful way, right? To change the purpose in a harmful way.
Yeah, exactly. To change the purpose in a harmful way. Okay? I'm trying to think of a good example of changing the purpose of in a harmful way. The purpose of the masjid is ibadah, right? It's to worship Allah. So if somebody's stopping people from worshiping, that's fasad in the masjid. Does that make sense? That would be fasad because they are changing the purpose in a harmful way, in a way that's harming people, right? Also harming the masjid. Okay? So these people, they are causing fasad on the earth. Okay? So understand that causing fasad is evil. Therefore, destroying property, destroying people, killing people, all this is fasad. Right? So bombs, dangerous. Right? Okay, but then the question, so get into a rabbit hole here. Because the question might be, we only got a few minutes. The question might be, are bombs halal in war?
You're not supposed to kill women and children, though.
You're also not supposed to
Mosques
destroy property and trees. You're not supposed to destroy any of those. And bombs do that. So it's a problem. It's a conundrum, right? And this is a discussion of scholars. Scholars have discussed the issue of bombs in general. I'm not talking about suicide bombs. We're talking about bombs, period, right? Is it permissible to bomb an area if there's trees there, for example? Is it permissible to bomb an area if there are properties there, houses, right? So obviously, we already know killing civilians, you can't do that. But now we're talking about the other thing, properties and trees, right? Like natural landscapes. Is it haram to destroy them? The general principle, yes, it's haram to destroy that because of the authentic, clear hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. However, there can be a necessity that can overrule that, and that needs a scholar to look at it. That's not something I am or I can help with. But there's a very clear hadith that says that the destroying property and trees and all of that is haram. But again, scholars have given fatwa to say that you can use a bomb for this and you can use a bomb for that. So that's something that scholars discuss based on their evidence and their knowledge, so on and so forth, that I can't delve into. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ, those are the losers. Allah describes all of that those are the fasiqeen, and those fasiqeen are losers. The fasiqeen are the ones who are getting out of the skin, right? Mm-hmm. And those are the losers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from being amongst them. Any questions? The mother comes before the husband in order, or just the household, you mean? The mother comes before the husband in order. So understand that first of all, we can't control what's in our hearts. So you can love your mother before more than you love your husband. That's fine. Because obviously you can't control what's in your heart. But in regards to like say for example, you have to do two things. One thing you do it for your mother. One thing you do it for your husband. You have to put your husband first, right? But in 99.9999% of the cases, you can just do both. It's not this or that, right? So I don't think, usually it's not an issue of this or that. Usually it's an issue of you just have to be good to both, right? But what I'm saying is that if you get into a situation where it is like this or that your husband comes first.
We do have to talk about the responsibility of the husband also too, while you are mentioning this one in parallel too.
Like what are the responsibilities towards the husband?
Husband towards the wife. Maybe we can probably discuss
What are the responsibilities from the husband towards the wife, and what are the responsibilities for the wife towards the husband? Is that what your question is?
Husband to wife, what the responsibility and what you have to do, you know.
Towards his wife?
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe we'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'd have to show him.
To be part of fair on this kind.
Yeah, so the thing is, it's important to understand, like, the value in each case.
Yes.
Okay? The husband, this is his wife, as the Prophet ﷺ said that men are shaqa'iq, or women are shaqa'iq al-rijal. They are like the other half. They're like the other side to men. Like that is you. That is a part of you.
Yes.
So if you're like you're harsh towards your wife, like you're being harsh towards yourself.
Correct.
That doesn't help you. Right? Like a smart person is soft towards himself. Right? So be soft towards your wife. Be easygoing towards your wife. So on and so forth. Right? Also, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Khayrukum khayrukum li nisa'i, wa ana khayrukum li nisa'i." Best of you are the best to your women, and I am the best to your women. Like meaning, follow me and my example towards your women. Right? I mean, there's a lot here, but what's important is to understand. Like, first of all, how the Prophet ﷺ dealt with this. That's number one. And then number two is like what is the dynamic of that relationship? Like, what is the hierarchy? And then how do you deal with that hierarchy? Yeah, like a man is the leader of the house. Just because I'm the leader, does that mean I have to always tell you do this and do that? I never did that. He didn't do that. Prophet ﷺ never told someone to do this. And the Prophet ﷺ never, when somebody did something, he never asked them, why did you do that? Or why didn't you do that? Prophet ﷺ never did that. Right? So like, the mindset somebody might have of a dictator, for example, Prophet ﷺ wasn't like that. Prophet ﷺ was very easygoing, very soft, very kind. Right? So I mean, it's important to understand that dynamic. Yeah, we gotta go. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وإياكم.